So, in this video, I'm going to address what does an architect do? Because do we just design things? Well, no, we don't. The job is just so much more than that. We do design things to begin with. That's probably the majority of, what a job entails. But, it's not just a base level of, oh, here's a building, we're just going to draw it from scratch. I mean, you get banter across different fields of construction, and the running joke with architects is we just use our crayons and draw whatever comes to mind. But it's not that really, and there is so much more to what we do. I was having a conversation with someone recently, had to explain this to a client, and I want to explain it to you because I think there is this kind of misunderstanding of architects being just designers, because we're not. We're more than that, and there's so much more that comes with the role. We spend a minimum of 7 years studying to become architects, and it's so much more than just designing it. And I think if we start with design, yes, we do that. It breaks down to so much. You've got things like you need to address, such as building regulations. We put together planning packs. We deal with the bureaucracy of getting your design in and approved. And then, like I say, after that, we put together these technical packages. We gather things together for tender. We organise the tender recipients. So, we work out who's going to be sort of the most appropriate person to receive these and offer us prices on them. We will organise the tender responses for you as well. We deal with the legal elements of things as well. So we will help organise the contract for you to choose. We would recommend which contract to use. We would recommend which suppliers to bring on, such as, sorry, not suppliers, because that comes under tender. The consultants, such as, are you likely to need a QS on this? Will you need a structural engineer, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of organisation for the client. And I think those kind of tie into your main factors of being an architect, so to speak. It's not just designing, as I say. But I think within that as well, when you often have consultants on board, who's dealing with the consultants, who's running them, and that usually falls on the architect. It's usually us chasing them or trying to make sure that they've got relevant information, or making sure there's that kind of cross-party discussion. And I will admit, depending on what style of project it is, whether it's under a traditional contract or say design and build, the architect's role changes greatly. So a lot of what I'm saying really applies to traditional based contracts and traditional projects. Whereas more on design and build stuff, a lot of the consultants will have been organised by the employer, because these are usually large scale projects such as house builders and things like that, or sort of big commercial clients who are churning out large buildings regularly, because they've got their team in place to sort of put those. So the architect's role is minimised quite a lot on those ones. But again, the architect does have a duty or responsibility on those that does extend slightly beyond design, but the majority of an architect's responsibility is given on traditional based contracts. So organising that legal stuff, such as suggesting which contracts are going to be advantageous for each client's project, that takes a lot of thought and often a lot of discussion. But we always sit down with the client, we talk them through it, that kind of thing. So there's a lot going on there. And then moving forward with that, when projects start to reach site, what happens then? Does the architect just stop being involved? Well, no, we don't. If anything, that's where most of our involvement starts to pick up. When things start to reach site, every month usually an architect will go out to site to do their site review, and from this the architect will start to put together documentation. If anything's not built on site correctly, they bring it up with the site manager, make sure that defects or things that don't reach a quality that's specified in the contract are rectified. Because also, if things aren't up to par as well, the architect can't sign off each month, but the architect has to sign a certificate each month to say that the work's been completed. And if that certificate's not signed, then the contractor can't get paid. What they're signing off on is the work's been done to that quality, release the payment to the contractor. If it's not been done or it's not to sufficient quality, this payment can get decreased, and unless the contractor objects, and then it goes further, but usually what will happen is the architect's comments will be taken, and it's very rare that the contractor will object to it if it's very clear and it's very well documented, and it'll kind of be accepted, and then that kind of gets dealt with later on down the line. But the architect has to make sure that this is going on, because it's essentially maintaining that quality, and as the architect, you're the client's representative on site. Not just that, sometimes issues happen. Sometimes drawings aren't comprehensive enough, and when that happens, usually the architect's called upon to help explain it a little more. Further drawings are required, and this happens on both traditional and sort of design and build contracts, because not everyone has the answers, and sometimes drawings can show something, and you might think you've kind of addressed every angle, but sometimes the contractors just not quite getting what you're trying to tell them. So you have to sort of put that together as well. That doesn't happen too often, but it happens. And like I say, that goes on, and then when it comes to the end of a project, an architect puts together a list of defects, anything that's not quite complete on the project, or something that's not sufficiently built, and anything that's on that list needs to be dealt with before they can finally sign off on the building. And if that doesn't happen, no final certificate can be issued, and as a consequence, the contractor doesn't get the final payment. And well, I say final payment, there is a retention that's held for a year because of potential defects that happen and might need to be corrected, but we'll get to that in a bit. But if the architect doesn't sign off, the building's not listed as complete and a final certificate's not issued. So often that can lead to delays and that kind of thing. So the architect's roles here is really important. They have to make sure they make the right call, because likewise, if the contractor hasn't built it properly, the building's broken. So putting your name on a final certificate to a incomplete building or something that's been built wrong it's just outright wrong yourself, and you're going to put yourself in legal trouble there as well. So the architect's got that responsibility there as well. And then once the architect does sign off on that, just making sure the final checks are in place to make sure that the binders are handed over in terms of health and safety files, in terms of any relevant ownership manuals, that kind of thing, and the insurance is transferred. And then there's kind of this period of a year after a project where any kind of issues that get brought up, either the contractor comes out and fixes it, or part of this retention is used to finance that repair. And then at the end of that year, because it gives the building a chance to basically spend a whole year through each season, and any defects in the building come to light, really. So once it gets to the end of that year, that retention is returned to the contractor or what's left of it, and at the end of that year, that's when the architect comes out to check that. So your job doesn't end once the building's finished, really. And then you've got 12 years where you might get sued for that, anything you've drawn wrong on that building, or any of your certificates that are wrong, because you're on the hook for it. You're liable for 12 years. Yeah, so there's quite a lot an architect does, and it's not just design. Like I sort of mentioned, maybe up to planning you're doing a lot of design, but even within that, you're dealing with a lot of stuff. You're running out site, you're making sure that the early stuff's done, like I say, bringing on all the consultants, making sure all the surveys are done, making sure any legal requirements are dealt with, and making sure the client's informed of their legal requirements as well. And like I say, when it goes into planning, you're dealing with all of that as well. You're dealing with the bureaucracy of the planning department or the planning portal, and sometimes the planning situation can go on for a bit longer as well, and it's making sure that dialogue's there with the case officer as well if needs be. And also prior to planning, sometimes you might need to put in a pre-planning application. Woo! So it's not just design. And when you're thinking about getting an architect on board, it's worth knowing that they're going to do so much for you. And before you start any project, just have a chat with an architect. It can never hurt. And you might end up taking them on board anyway, or you might go with a different architect. But architects do so much on a project, and it's often worth remembering that. So yeah, hopefully that sort of addresses in some detail, hopefully some coherent detail about what architects do and what's often expected of the role. And so if you're interested in becoming an architect, be aware you're going to have to understand a lot of this stuff. So yeah, feel free to leave any questions down below. If you've got any other comments, leave them down below too. Don't forget to like the video, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. Until next time, I'll see you later.